Hello everyone, welcome to day 7 of 100 days of AWS, and today we are going to talk about IP addressing in Amazon Lightsail. Now today I'm going to talk about IP address, what are the various type of IP address, that is IPv4, IPv6, what is NAT or network address translation and how it is being used in cloud, specifically with AWS, and what are the types of IP address specifically in Amazon Lightsail, which is similar to what we have in Amazon EC2. So let's understand what is IP address. This is a quick refresher. IP address is a unique identifier to identify device on a network. And probably if you would have remembered in the OSI stack, this is from Wikipedia. In the OSI stack, we have 7 layers and IP address comes in the network layer where you have the datagram as packet, and the complete functionality of IP is to help the network devices to route those packets across the network. So that's why in the network layer you will have IP as one of the protocol. So IP addresses are made up of series of numbers separated by period. We have 192.168.4.1. Every part of this IP address is called an octet separated by a period. There are two types of IP addresses. This is IPv4 and IPv6. So this one is IPv4. In IPv6, it is referenced as hexadecimal. All right. So if I see in our instance, you can see we have a IPv4 address and IPv6 address. So IPv6 address are newer and use a longer format. So it has, it's a more IP addresses as compared to IPv4 address. So every device on a network need IP addresses. In fact, your laptop, your mobile phone, every device who accesses internet will have an IP address. In fact, if it's not accessing internet as well, and if it's only accessing local network, it would be using an IP address. So these are specifically true for almost all devices using any protocol, for example, Wi-Fi, Ethernet, these kind of protocol, it would be using IPv4 or IPv6 addresses. Now, I will give you a brief differences between IPv4 and IPv6. So IPv4 have 32-bit address, and that's why it's called an octet. So we divide these 32-bit into 8 bits each, and that's why you have 4 octets. That is, for example, this IP address can be represented into you can say bits. So if I go to any tool, so you can go to any online tool. Let me just show you. So this is a IP subnet calculator from calculator.net, and I've input my IP address and a reference and a relevant subnet mask. So in case of IPv4 addresses, you will have a relevant subnet mask, which actually defines how big the network is. And subnetting is a concept where you can create multiple smaller networks from a bigger network given in case of IPv4 addresses. So in IPv4, we have two types of IP addresses. One is the public IP address and the private IP address. All right, so let's consider this diagram where we have a public IP address, and then we have defined the following IP addresses inside our private class. So every class, like class A, class B, class C in IPv4 addresses will have some subnet defined for private IP addresses. And you can see in class A we have 10.8, 10.0.0.0/8, which actually means that complete subnet of 10.0 can be used for a private IP addressing. Class B is 172.16, which is ranging from 172.16 to 172.31, and all these addresses are private IP address. And similarly in class C, 192.168 to 192.168.255. So all these IP addresses are private. Now what happens, suppose in an organization you are given an address and you have 10 computers. I will just make it simple. For example, at your home you have a Wi-Fi router. So this is our Wi-Fi router. Now we have all the devices, right? We have our laptops and we have a mobile phone. All right, so these are laptops and these are mobile phone. Now we need to connect to the Wi-Fi. Every of these devices will have an IP address. Now the problem is that if you get public IP for all these devices, it is very costly because of the limited, you can say, availability. So what happens? We use this public IP address by the router, and what router does, it will provide some private IP address to all these devices. So if you go and check your IP address, it would be somewhere in the range of 192 or 172, depending upon how the network is configured in your mobile phone or in your laptop. So it should be in the range of this until unless you are directly connected to a public network. So for example, this would be 192.168.30.2. Just an example, it can be anything, but it's highly probable you would be using 192.168 or 172.16 or 10. Some range like this. So in this way, this IP would be this one, and this IP would be 3, 4, so on. So what will happen, once there is a packet coming, right? For example, you are browsing internet and there is a person browsing the internet from here. So what will happen whenever there is a packet coming inside to the router? So router would do a technique called network address translation, which specifically means that it will change the IP address from here to somewhere here. So this concept is called network address translation. So this actually keeps track of your public IP address to private IP address. Now this complete scenario is relevant to our cloud computing as well, and specifically anywhere in cloud. If you go to your Lightsail and if you click on your instance and click on manage, you will see you have this public IP address and this IPv6 address. So let's come to networking, and you can see this is your public IP address and this is your private IP address. Now this is in the same range 172.16, 172.26, which is part of 172.16 to 172.31. It's inside this class B IP address range. So what happens that if you want to communicate internally inside AWS, you can use this. There is a concept of VPC here. So this would become your VPC or virtual private cloud. And inside your virtual private cloud, all the components can talk to each other because they are part of the same subnet. So this would be, for example, this is my Lightsail instance one. I think this is this instance and it has this IP. For example, I spin up a new instance called, so this can talk to each other. So inside VPC, all the IP address can talk to each other with the private IP address. So you don't need the public IP address to communicate. This makes the communication secure because your traffic is not leaving out your secure zone, which is inside your VPC. But to communicate with the outside network, you need something called NAT gateway, which essentially performing the NAT from the public IP address to private IP address. So NAT is a technique used to share a single public IP address across multiple devices on a private IP address. And I've given the example. So there are three types of NATing. One is static NAT, where you statically map one public IP address, to one public IP address to one private IP address. So in this case, what happens? This IP address, this public IP address, is statically mapped to this IP address. So all the traffic coming to this IP address would be forwarded to this IP address. Then you have dynamic NAT, where there is a pool of public IP address. One of the IP address would be attached to the private IP address from that pool. That is called dynamic NAT. And the third one, which is the mostly used, is NAT or overloading NAT or PAT. What happens here in the NAT gateway? It will map it to some port. For example, it will map this application, this device to a port. I will just give a random port 399 and this device to another port. So all the traffic coming to this port would be considered for this device, and it will use this port to actually track from where this traffic is coming. So this is also called the port address translation. So this one is most relevant and it's used in your Wi-Fi routers and in your NAT gateway. Now if you talk about Lightsail, you can see your public IP address is directly mapped to this one. Now there is a caveat to it. If you go to your instance and you just click on reboot, so your public IP will change. Why? Because every time your instance is rebooted, it is being allocated a IP address from a dynamic pool of IP addresses. So it is kind of a dynamic IP address where your whatever available public IP address would be with AWS in that region, it will assign that to your instance. So I'll just stop it, and once I start it again, this IP address will change, because this IP address is kind of a dynamic mapping from a dynamic pool of IP address available in that region to your private IP address. So this is a problem, if you are hosting a website and every time your IP address changes, then you will have a lot of issues. So for example, now if I start it, you can see the IP address now showing is not available. It will become available in some moment now. Alright, so it is available now, and you can see the IP address has definitely changed. It is into a different range now, 54.251. And if I go to manage, you can see this IP address is showing different. So that is a problem, in case of you are using a random public IP. So for this, you need to use static IP. So what you can do, you can buy a static IP, all right, and I can just write static IP Singapore. I will create and attach. So every time now you restart, your IP will not change. So you can see this is my static IP which has been assigned, and I can go and check this static IP Singapore. This is my IP and it is attached to an instance, this one. Now I can use this static IP with the NAT gateway and use it with multiple instances as well, which we will see in the later videos when we are working with EC2 instance. But this is how you get a static IP. Now I can access my website using this static IP, and this IP address would not change. But you cannot share it with others using this IP address. You need to buy a domain name, and in the next video, that is tomorrow, we will see how you can get a domain name with AWS and how you can map it with your static IP address and how it works. So tomorrow I will talk about DNS and domain name and how it works with AWS and specifically with Lightsail, and how you can map it with your static IP. In case you have any question, you can reach out to me privately on Discord. And if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And I will see you in the next video.